Welcome back to the Early Weigh-In podcast. Sorry for the week off. My wife and I welcomed a newborn into the family during the break here, but we are back, man. And although there are some nice fights scattered throughout, I do wish this for a little bit better card, if I'm being honest. We got 13 total fights. Main event is at women's bantamweight, where we see former champion Holly Holm taking on Myra Bueno Silva. And then the co-main event, Della Maddalena been pushed up here to take on the newcomer Bassil Hafez. And then we still got Duriev versus the Iron Turtle. Still got Terrance McKinney on this card. I'm ready to talk the best fights and the best bets on it. As far as last week goes, UFC 290, 2 title fights, only 3 decisions total. We had 4 finishes in under a minute. International Fight Week absolutely delivered, man. Myself was managed to escape with a small bit of profit, cashing in on the new flyweight champion. I'll go ahead and let you recap how we finished up, man.
Yeah, man. We'll take a look over at your card first. Like you said, your underdog play of the night on Alexander Pantoja. He fought hard for your money, man, and a really good fight. Definitely the rightful winner. I think the correct scorecard is 48-47 for Pantoja. I thought Brandon stole 2 of the rounds, but I do think that they gave it to the rightful winner. Excellent value on Alexander Pantoja. Like you said, plus 175 against anybody. That's a steal for Alexander Pantoja. You had 1.5 units on Jalen Turner against Dan Hooker. Another really hard-fought fight. He ended up exploding to a really high price tag at minus 245. So you definitely got some CLV. But, it was Dan Hooker's night for sure. And then Jimmy Crute, Alonzo Minifield. We both ended up falling into this trap. And, Jimmy Crute, I think, he's one of the few guys who at 27 years old is making the right decision to retire.
Right.
Save his health. I don't think that this is the right career path for him. He's tough, but his body just can't hold up to it, You also had 2 units on the under 1.5 rounds in the Bo Nickel fight. It was a parlay that ended up getting scrapped. So it's 2 units at minus 425. That one ended up hitting pretty easily. Bo Nickel, surprising that he finished it the way that he did, but I think that he's going to be a legitimate problem in the years to come as he kind of develops into a full MMA fighter. Then you had Petrino wins inside the distance at minus 150. Definitely a sweat, Marcin Prachnio was toughing it out, and it looked like Petrino had the submission locked up. It looked like everybody in his camp had bet the Petrino submission. He got him where he wanted to, and he made it look easy. I don't know if he wanted to prove that he could go for an extended amount of time or what, but he did show a pretty well-rounded game and looked pretty scary doing it. We go over to, you ended up the card plus 0.51 units. Like you said, squeaking by with a little bit of profit. Definitely a good night. We look over at my card. It looks pretty bad as far as a lot of red. A lot of red. Ultimately, I ended minus 3.35 units, which is, somewhat surprising for this many misses. But my only straight bet of the night was Dan Hooker at plus 240. That ultimately saved my night from just a huge loss. But let's look down the card. Crute by decision. Got a little cheeky there. I thought that he was going to use a smarter game plan, get the wrestling going early. Alonzo Minifield, he's a powerful dude, man. He's a powerful dude. The Howergy wins by TKO. Dang, she's hittable. At the end of the day, she gets tagged in almost all of her fights, and it was bound to happen at some point. I didn't think it would be Denise Gomes to do it, but she did end up getting it done and exposing Howergy's holes in her game. She has all the potential in the world, but she's going to have to fix those before she gets up or takes steps up in the UFC. Jesus Santos Aguilar wins by submission plus 230. Didn't get to see that fight play out, man. I mean, I think obviously he was the side, and usually he likes to get it done by submission, which maybe is why we saw Ross's hands drop. But I don't know. Didn't get to see that one play out. He was definitely the side, though. Camilla Kirk, Esteban Ribovic's fight ends by TKO. After that fight happened, I kind of just, was like, this is going to be one of those nights, isn't it? I mean, every chance in the world for that fight to end by TKO, and it just didn't happen. I had that at plus 125. I really don't hate that bet. I'd make it again, just how it plays out sometimes. I got a little greedy on the Pantoja wins by submission. I knew he was the side, but I just wasn't sure how I was going to play it. I got a little bit greedy with the plus 460, him having already done it before and then knowing that he got the back like twice in that fight for an extended amount of time. I don't hate the bet again. It's just variance was not on my side. That would have definitely been a game changer had that hit, though.
Yeah.
And then I also fell into the Whitaker trap, man. For what it's worth, I think Dricus du Plessis is going to be a problem in the future. I just kind of wasn't giving him credit for the wins that he was able to put together up until this point. But man, against Whitaker in there, he looked big, he looked sharp, powerful. I mean, he looks a little raw with a lot of his techniques, but they work. They work. So more power to him. And then Turner wins by submission was a hedge in the Dan Hooker fight. It ended up only being 2 units that I profited in that fight because of the hedge I took on the Turner by submission. I ended up the night minus 3.35 units. And like I said, it really is surprising how little I lost considering how many fights or bets that I did not hit. But I can forget about that one. It's not the worst loss. And hopefully we can find some good spots here in the next week.
Yes, sir.
We start off the night in the bantamweight division, the women's bantamweight division. It's a little wild that we're sitting here breaking down yet another Holly Holm main event. But here we are. And, for what it's worth, looking at this from a betting perspective, we might be getting a blessing here, man. Now, probably the biggest thing that jumps off the page when breaking down this fight, Holly is 41 years old. And while that's usually a cause for concern with most of the fighters that we break down, Holly does kind of seem to be that exception, similar to Yoel Romero. Physically, I think she's in better shape than 90% of the roster.
Right.
And, her fight style, it's far less physically demanding and much more technique focused. And I think it's something that she can, continue to stay elite at for years to come, even though she has surpassed that 40-year mark. Bueno Silva, on the other hand, she's extremely tough, a grappling heavy submission artist that has found success in her recent UFC wins via quick submissions over, some middle tier level competition. And while, she's looked good in those past fights, she's now faced with one of the biggest names in women's MMA in her first ever 5-round fight. And, you look at her past losses, most notably that Manon Fiorot fight, and she struggles, getting on the inside against high-level strikers that have the ability to use their length and keep her at range. Manon Fiorot, in that Manon Fiorot fight, you even saw Bueno Silva get visibly frustrated as an attempt to kind of convince Manon to stray away from her game plan. It looked desperate, and it's a tough look to shake as somebody capping her fights whenever you see a fighter that's so limited in an MMA fight. It's just it's a hard visual to shake. And now against Holly Holm, essentially, I think she's up against a bigger, more experienced Manon Fiorot. Holm has the high level experience that I think she'll be able to avoid any submission attempts off the back if it does wind up on the mat early. Of armbar from guard in women's MMA, I do think that Holly is a great look this week, and minus 170. There's been a little bit of pushback. If you can get, I mean, I don't see how Holly doesn't cover 70% in this fight. So if you can get her better than minus 225, I think that there's value. It's just tough laying juice on women's MMA, but at least we're talking about Holly Holm, who's proven time and time again that she can perform at a high level. It's the most credible women's MMA fight that you're going to be able to cap right here.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you see this the exact same way that I do, because if you eliminate the age factor for Holly Holm, and it would be a max bet for me potentially. It's the only thing keeping me from laying just more than just a unit on her at this point. You talked about her physique. Looking at her online, looks in killer shape. The performance against Yana Santos, there's no evidence of a decline in Holly Holm to me at this point. She's the one with all the experience at the higher level, the only one with 5-round experience. She is twice the kickboxer and much sharper at range, like you talked. And I think she's still, even at this age, this point of her career, showing, that she's still evolving in what I think personally, I think she should be on a 4-fight win streak right now since losing to Amanda Nunes. And in all 4 of these fights, she's not just striking with these girls, man. She's mixing in takedowns. She's mixing in cage control. She's still evolving as a fighter, and I just feel like she has many more paths to victories to win here. Where Bueno Silva is just kind of like land the home run shot, try to change the fight, and I don't like backing that in women's MMA, especially when you've really not seen Holly ever been clubbed, and sub before. She got good submissions, but I think she lacks the offensive wrestling of somebody like Miesha Tate to get Holly down. I don't think Bueno Silva is going to have that dog in her in the championship rounds we saw Miesha Tate have. And then you talked about the one fight that I wanted to reference as well, the Manon Farrow fight, and it's a flyweight, man. It's not even a bantamweight. It's not even a former title challenger, not even like a longtime kickboxer. And then I bring up the fight against Marina Moroz at 125 as well, where I've seen Marina Moroz take this girl down repeatedly. She has no get-up game. And if you can stay safe from her submissions in her guard, you can keep her on the bottom, man. And at one, I do think that Bueno Silva is going to be potentially better at 135 than 125. She's a big girl. I think she could be healthier without this weight cut. But wins over Yanan Wu, Stephanie Egger, Lena Landsberg, that's no litmus test to tell me how you're going to fare against Holly Holm. So Caesars had her at minus 145 to start the week, man. I got a unit on her there. I'm with you. I think there's a world where she's 65% every time they fight, and could look 70%, man, especially as this fight progresses. It almost kind of reminds me of like a Sean Strickland, a Boost fight. I think we're getting a real buy low spot on Holly Holm here. And I did my job with the closing line value. And, unless she's hit some sharp decline, I expect Holly to pretty much go out and do her job as well. Moving on to the co-main, Jack Della Maddalena versus Bassil Hafez. It was opening up the main card, now promoted to the co-main event spot, clearly, in my opinion, to highlight Jack Della Maddalena, a guy who I think is a legit welterweight prospect. And until he runs into a very good wrestler who's able to neutralize him for 15 minutes or take his back and sub him, I favor him to beat a lot of guys when the fight plays out on the feet. As far as boxing goes in the UFC, off the top of my head, man, there's just not a lot of people that I rate as highly as an MMA boxer as Jack Della Maddalena. The way he works the body, everything in combination, it's very, very beautiful and fun to watch, man. As far as the Hafez guy goes, I knew nothing about him prior to watching tape on him today. Coming in here on a week's notice, Jack's still a massive favorite, but he's not a minus 1,500 favorite here. So odds makers know he's got a tougher fight in front of him. He got a Philly native, jiu-jitsu black belt. The guy is a decent grappler, and I think early on in this fight, he might land a takedown or something, and it might drive this Jack Della line quite down. You might be able to enter him, a little bit better on live. And I know there's a talk of him training at altitude. He was at Factory X before. Now you see him posting pictures with Whitman and Gaethje. And you would think that is always going to lend to having a good gas tank. But when I look at this guy's frame, when I see that he's taking it on short notice, him missing weight, having to come back, hop up on the scale, I don't like his chances the further this fight goes and, into the later first and second round. So if Jack can survive an early onslaught, I think he puts this guy away late in round 1 or sometime in round 2, man.
Yeah, especially after seeing the face-offs. I expected whenever I was watching tape on Bassil for him to be, significantly bigger. Like you said, the way he carries muscle, his frame, it kind of all points to him being just like super juiced looking and really big for the division. But Jack Della Maddalena is also bigger than him here. Yeah. So that's a little frustrating if you were looking for a spot to fade JDM here. I think Bassil's a pretty good fighter. He does have tremendous power. And like you talked about, if he came in with the game plan to wrestle, he could definitely be live. But I really can't help but feel like this isn't another first round KO incoming for JDM here. The way that these two guys fight, I think that we're in for fireworks for as long as it lasts. Bassil, he's kind of a total brute. He just kind of spams that 1-2 down the middle until someone drops. And, I think JDM, he has that forward pressure and the ability to slip punches inside the inside range, that he's going to make some pretty simple reads on Bassil's basic striking. And I do think that late in round 1, early round 2, he is going to find those shots and eventually knock out Bassil. Like I said, that price tag of plus 400 whatever might be a decent one if he does land that early takedown, as we really haven't seen what JDM offers whenever he is taken down. But for as long as it lasts on the feet, I do expect JDM to put on a masterclass with superior striking skills and find the KO. It's just unfortunate that the KO is priced at minus 230. It's tough to play that anyway. So probably a pass for me. But like I said, for as long as it lasts, it'll be a fun one for sure. Speaking of fun ones while they last, Ottman Azaitar versus Francisco Prado is my fight of the night. Initially, I thought that this was going to be a rock'em sock'em type fight. But, the more that I look into the fight, the more I think that this might just be one-way traffic. Both guys known for their quick finishes, with both of them coming off their first career losses. And when I look at how each of these guys fight, I just think that Prado is the much cleaner of the two. From the tape that I've seen, it looks like Ottman's been given favorable matchups where, they're willing to give him the fight that he needs to get the quick finish. Literally half the guys on Ottman's knockout highlight reel have him in a tie clinch, and Ottman just unleashes some dirty boxing bombs and is able to find the knockout. In Prado's tape, I see much more measured chaos with his striking, and him only being 21 years old and suffering that first loss to a veteran like Jamie Malarkey. It might have been the best thing that could have happened to him at this point in his career. Not only does it bring him down to earth and let him know that he still has a lot to learn at this point in his career, but it also proves to him that he can go a full 15 minutes in the cage, which he hadn't been able to do up until that point. 5 months removed from that loss, I do expect improvements. 21 years old, he's going to get better and better as he steps inside the cage. And for what it's worth, in Ottman's last fight, I thought he looked awful, man. I mean, I know it's against somebody like Matt Frivola, who, is doing amazing, but he didn't look fast. It didn't look like his power was there. And then he obviously did not eat shots very well. And I think Prado carries some similar power to Matt Frivola and the willingness to just stand and trade inside the pocket. And if that's the case, I do think he's going to be the faster of the two. And I fully expect Prado to get it done here. The line being minus 115, it's super tempting. And I might be talking about this later on in the podcast if I don't find another spot, but this is a really good spot. I think Prado is the side, and I think that this will be a great one for as long as it lasts, but I do think Prado is the side here.
Yeah, man, absolute banger of a fight. One I got the under 2.5 parlayed on. 26 combined fights. These guys have been to 2 decisions. I think somebody is hitting the deck. But you briefly mentioned it. Also super interesting because both of the guys got their 0 taken, last time out, and got to bounce back from that. You said correctly, man, no shame in getting slept by Frivola, who went out there and did it to Drew Dober, man. A guy who's historically had a legendary chin. But you kind of touched on it as well, man. Coming back off of that 2-year layoff, he didn't look himself to me either. He's also somebody who's completely untested on the regional scene. You talk about the matchups in the UFC. I mean, Kama Worthy and Tumu Paklin are 2 of the chinniest fighters that we've seen come across the lightweight roster. Ottman is a very front-loaded guy, a very basic guy, a guy to me, if he doesn't land that home run shot, he doesn't really have much to offer. And personally, again, I go back to after that layoff, him showing up to that Matt Frivola fight. Thought he looked old, man. That was just kind of the way that I put it for him. He didn't look like he had whatever was in the bag being delivered to him anymore. Prado, 21 years old, man, hungry kid at this point. You spoke a lot about that debut loss. If there's anybody getting better at this point, it is the 21-year-old kid. It is a guy who just went 15 minutes for the first time in a debut. He's bringing in a nice little size advantage. He's going to be 3 inches taller than Azaitar, have a 5-inch reach on him. On top of, like you said, just being way more technical than him, having way more in the arsenal than swinging those big hooks. And I think he's going to be a lot faster, kind of like Frivola. I think the shots are going to come a little bit straighter, and I think we're going to see him beat Azaitar to the punch. When Azaitar throws a big hook, I think he's going to get caught. So after hearing your breakdown, it's pretty much tempting to me because I've been looking at Prado all week as well. Should I mention where the TKO is priced at here on FanDuel?
Oh, no, not. I don't think quite yet.
Keep it. I like it. All right, so we'll touch back on that later, but yeah, man, I think I'm going to side with Prado to get the job done too. Moving on to my fight of the night, Terrance McKinney versus Nazim Sadykov. Much like your fight, man, I expect this to be nuts from the opening bell. McKinney, one of probably the off the top of my head, one of the most front-loaded guys that I've ever seen. If he doesn't get you out of there in the first 3 or 4 minutes, the wheels they fall off bad.
Randy Costa.
Oh, exactly, man. A great example. And more so with Terrance than Costa. I think Terrance is in a tough spot. He's still young. There are some things you can tweak in your camp to possibly fix the cardio. But Costa's like, 7 or 8 fights deep into his, professional career. We're almost 20 fights deep here for Terrance McKinney. I think what Terrance McKinney has shown so far is just what Terrance McKinney is. I think that should be his game plan. If he doesn't go out there and get you out of there early with the length, with the athleticism, with his wrestling or jiu-jitsu, he's not the most technical guy, and I don't think he's going to beat very many guys in this lightweight division if the fight's just solely a striking fight. In this matchup particularly, I think Terrance should be shooting takedowns. I think he's the far superior wrestler here. I think he's got the far superior finishing ability from the top. I think the length, the skill set, when he gets on top, man, I think he might make it look a little bit easy. But for as long as this fight is going to play out on the feet, I got to favor the other side and Nazim. Man, he's a nasty southpaw, clean left hand, spinning attacks. I love the way the guy starts to the body, the way he works in the clinch. And I do think he has great forward pressure that's going to put Terrance on his back foot a lot here. Thing about it is his striking defense pretty much just as poor as Terrance, man. His hands are down. I've seen him hurt before. I go back to the wrestling defense as well, man. There's going to be places where Terrance can win this fight, especially early on. But if it does get hairy, if it does get out of that first round, from what I've seen, Nazim Sadykov has much more heart to him, a lot more dog in him, as they say. But fireworks from the start. I struggle heavily, honestly, with the pick here. It's hard to back somebody with the cardio concerns of McKinney. But, man, for the purpose of the podcast, I think I'm going to side with the underdog and Terrance McKinney, man. I think there's openings for him to go out there and get this done early in the fight. Yeah, I'm going to side with Terrance McKinney ever so slightly. How do you see this one going down?
Yeah, so, I think the first 2 minutes of McKinney versus any lightweight is a close fight, I mean, I really do. I think until McKinney gets touched, he's live against anybody. He just carries a ton of power. Like you said, he's kind of shown us the full development of his game. If he can't get you out early, I don't think that there's much to show for him later on in the fight. You talked about you wanting him to wrestle, and I kind of disagree with that. I would rather, if I'm in his camp, I would rather him just go all out for the finish early, and that more or less just him standing and banging with people. I think, as we've seen, when he gets up to this upper echelon, if there's any point in time where actual MMA fundamentals come into place, he gets outclassed. He overworks early when he tries to get people to the ground, and he gasses even sooner than he would whenever he's standing and banging. It's a scary way to bet on Terrance McKinney. But his round 1 prop, as long as he's not coming out like the last fight and trying to conserve energy, I think plus 240 is value, just because that's his win condition right there. And it's much better than having to pay, only getting plus 125. You can more than double it and get all of his win condition, in my opinion. But Terrance McKinney plus 240 round 1 is, the play that I'm looking at. I think Nazim is obviously the better fighter, though. But I would play Terrance McKinney plus 240 again against anybody not in the top 10. Like, I really would. I think it's a fair play. But great fight to watch for sure. For my fighter to watch, I am taking Estela Nunez. I think that she's an excellent fighter for not having a UFC win, man. She's been matched up against 3 really tough girls. Ariana Carnelosi was able to take her down a few times. She looked amazing initially. I think I had her by KO in that fight. And Carnelossi just with a chin of steel, took everything that she had. And then similar to Terrance McKinney, just kind of falls apart if she's not able to get the finish early. She does kind of tend to gas. She carries a lot of muscle. She throws with a lot of power when she does throw. In the Sam Hughes fight, again, it's kind of like she she touched her up early, and Sam Hughes is tough enough to withstand that pressure and eventually just wear on her and get the takedowns and get the dub. And the Yasmin Howargi fight, again, she touches her early. Yasmin's able to withstand it, and then she starts finding the holes as the fight goes further. I think in this Dudakova fight, it's nice that it's a different style than the Yasmin fight. If Nunes is able to stuff Dudakova early, I think Dudakova is maybe less durable than Sam Hughes and not as good striking as Carnelossi or Howargi. So she could find herself in some trouble if Nunes is able to keep this on the feet. And finally, she could find a win. It's one of these things where I'm looking at this fight. It's pretty binary. If she's able to stop the takedowns, then I do think that she is a super live underdog. If Dudakova does find the takedown, she has not shown me enough with her takedown defense to make me think that she's going to be able to stop a submission grappler like Dudakova and not get submitted. So tough fight to call, but she is my fighter to watch. This is her one opportunity to kind of make a case for her to stay in the UFC, and I think she's got a decent opponent with a pretty one-dimensional game in front of her.
Yeah, I think we had talked about this earlier in the week. We kind of looked at her as an underdog if she just wasn't at a fight. She was at a stylistic disadvantage, So it does make it tough, but a great fighter to watch this week. I'm going to go Azat Maxim, 16-0, Uzbekistan prospect. I feel like you got to bring him up, man. The other undefeated prospect out of that region being Shavkat. This guy is the king of, I think they call him the king of Uzbekistan or something. So he's pretty well loved, pretty well regarded out of that region, and looks pretty well rounded, man. The guy can strike pretty well, can grapple pretty well. He's finished 12 of his 16 wins, which at flyweight I consider to be pretty impressive. But, the first half of the resume, man, it's pretty padded. Just you can't beat around the bush. It really is, man. And it does raise some concerns that there might be some fraudulence there. And personally, I don't think he's getting a slouch in his debut, There is the concern for Tyson Nam at 40 years old in such a low weight class because you cannot lose speed at flyweight. But historically, Nam's been one of those rare flyweights who actually carry knockout power. Historically, Nam's been somebody with above average takedown defense. And I know his last loss is coming via knockout, which to me, a front kick to the face can knock out just about anybody. That's the first time he'd been knocked out in 10 years. Historically, the guy's been durable as can be. I just think that Azat Maxim here, he could have a tougher fight on his hands than the line is indicating. Nam TKO plus 750. It's I think 11% implied odds, and I think Tyson Nam can win this fight probably 25% of the time, and 20% of the time it's going to be my knockout. So I think there's a ton of value sitting on Nam's TKO at plus 750. And Azat Maxim's got a lot left to prove to me coming in here at minus 400, implying 80%. So for those reasons, man, the undefeated prospect Azat Maxim's going to be my fighter to watch.
I like it. We'll move on to the underdog section of the podcast. Okay, so for my underdog, it's just plus money. It's not necessarily a money line underdog, but it is plus money. It's Nunes Dudakova under 2.5 plus 104. It's barely an underdog, but it is. And I just like that there's two sides to this coin right here. Like I just talked about, Nunes' finishing upside early is her best opportunity. And I do think if she stuffs that early takedown, she's going to expose the hell out of Dudakova. I don't think that Dudakova has the striking on the feet to stand with somebody as experienced as Estela Nunes is in kickboxing. I think that her record was 50-4 or 40-4 in kickboxing. She's a legitimate kickboxer. So if this stands on the feet, Dudakova is way out of her element. And on that same side, Dudakova, if she does find that takedown, I think Nunez has kind of shown that she's a fish out of water. Thankfully for her, she's been fighting girls like Sam Hughes who can't finish a turkey sandwich, So it's I think that there's two ways that this fight could end inside the distance, and to be able to get the under 2.5 in a fight that's pretty low level with two girls with finishing upside, I do think that that's going to be my underdog of the card.
Nice one, man. Underdog was going to be from the co-main event. I'm going to take Albert Duraev at plus 135. I was, prepared to talk in depth on this one, man. So I've ran tape back quite a bit on this one here. I do see people, and I will have to agree, there's a chance come round 3, Park could win it at a decent clip. He could be the one with the better gas tank down the stretch. In tight, probably slightly the better boxer. But this is not Dennis Tulinian. This is not Joseph Holmes. To me, this fight's very, very close. To me, I think this fight goes to decision 65% of the time, probably. And to me, I want the plus money ticket in my hand almost on every time, pretty much. I think a fight's going to be going the distance. I want the plus money on the Russian to be exact in a close fight. Duraev also going to have a bit of a size advantage here. I think, like I said, Park may have better boxing in tight, but at kickboxing range, I think this is a really close fight, man. Duraev is, he just outstruck Cheaty. Like, he really didn't even need takedowns to beat Cheaty. Like, anybody that can hang with a 6'3" guy on the feet when your primary path to beat him is to grapple him, I think you can make a fight with Jung Young Park close on the feet. And then when I just watch tape, man, I don't know how you can overlook Park's performances against Fluffy Hernandez and Eric Anders and the way that they were able to take him down. There is a real possibility that Duraev is going to have success grappling here. And much like maybe the Romanov fight, it doesn't have to be for 3 full rounds, man. You can bank 2 rounds and survive a 3rd round. And Park's not – again, it's Tulinian and Joseph Holmes, but Park isn't the most prolific finisher in the world. You see him take down John Phillips and I think have 14 minutes of control time and can't put the guy away. Like, he's not the biggest finisher. And so, man, getting someone who I think has a big wrestling upside at plus money, a fight that I think is going the distance at a high clip, it's very intriguing to me. I've pretty much decided that I'm going to hit my underdog of the podcast every single week because when I don't, they always cash. So 1 unit on Duraev plus 135. I think he's going to win a round, but I think he's going to make this fight close, and I think he's going to take a split decision.
I like it. Moving on to the prop section of the podcast. I've kind of got 2. It's a you pick how you want to play. It's the same fight, though. We kind of touched on it already a little bit. It's the Ottman Azaitar versus Francisco Prado fight. There's a fight ends by TKO prop on FanDuel right now at minus 185. And I really like that because it's obviously the most likely path for both guys to win. But the under 1.5 is minus 166 on FanDuel. And ultimately, I don't think that this fight goes over 7.5 minutes. I don't really see how that happens. And with the under 1.5, you're at least getting a club and sub, which we have seen from both guys in their career. So I think that that's maybe a little bit safer of a play, although I like the extra 7.5 minutes for the fight ends by TKO. So they're both, I think, value. I think they're both going to hit. I'll pick the under 1.5 as my official play. The minus 166 on FanDuel. I think that that's appropriately priced. If this does go over the 1.5, I think it goes to decision. It's just like one of those fights. If their chin does hold up for 7.5 minutes, I do think that they're just going to be able to kind of get into a sloppy fight, and it'll drag out the entire 15. So the under 1.5 is the official play to kind of cover the club and sub and their most likely path to victory.
Yes, man. I'm taking an under 1.5 as well. I'm going to take Terrance McKinney versus Nazim Sadykov. It's priced at minus 175. And I thought the line was pretty damn generous for a Terrance McKinney fight. 17 of his 18 professional fights have hit the under 1.5 rounds. And while we do see Sadykov let some of these wins slip into the 3rd round, Terrance is going to force a fight out of him right away. If Terrance McKinney were to win this fight, he's going to cash this ticket for me probably in maybe the first half of the first round, and I think it is. I think personally, I think he can get the back up against the fence. I think he can submit him the way he did Eric Gonzalez. But man, watching tape, it's kind of like my moment. I think Nazim might get slept with a head kick, man. The way he dips off, keeps his hands down, it's there in tape. The same one Drew Dober got caught with. I think it's there for Terrance McKinney, man. But if that doesn't happen, he's going to get backed up, and I think he's going to get lit up by Sadykov. Sadykov is a mean guy. He's a guy that goes for the kill when he smells blood. And McKinney, his body language is horrible, man. When the guy starts slowing down, you can tell it very, very bad. And I think Nas will just turn up the pressure, find the body, put him away. Both guys have a clear path to victories here, which result in finishes. So should be a good fight from the start. I got 1 unit on the under 1.5 here.
I like it a lot. We go to best bet of the card. Shoot. So I was kind of between Prado and Holly, and I think I'm going to go with Prado. We've touched on him a couple of times. It's tough to talk about him or continue talking about him, but I figure I'll be having this fight on my card a couple different ways. But the heaviest will be the Prado money line. I just think that he's the younger, better fighter. He's ever improving. He hasn't been caught with performance-enhancing drugs. He just got a reality check. And, I think that he's
knockout.
What was that?
Not coming off a bad knockout.
Exactly. It's against a much, a fighter in Jamie Malarkey that you can't hang your head about losing to, especially being that young. All the signs are pointing to Prado, and we're getting a really generous price tag. So for my best bet, it's going to be Francisco Prado.
Yeah, I think if you take into fact just their age, not even who the fighter is, man or woman or anything, but 10-year age difference is like a 70% win rate or something like that. So minus 115. I think I'm going to get there with you, man, before the fight start tomorrow. Might get a little bit of flack here, tipping out my best bet as almost minus 300, but I think Evan Elder's got Genaro Valdez covered everywhere, man. I bet Evan Elder at minus 280, and it's hard to say this when the line's where it is, but I think Elder's I think he's an underrated fighter. I think the guy is not great anywhere, but I think he's good everywhere. This he's training down at a great gym, Killcliff FC. You see his first 2 UFC fights. They're tough fights, man. He goes up a weight class on short notice, gives a good account of himself. He just, can't stop the grappling of the true welterweight. Then follows it up with Nazim, man. And he looked phenomenal, honestly. He's up 2 rounds on all 3 of the judges' scorecards until the cut in round 3. And I think this Genaro Valdez is a significant step down in competition from both of those guys. I don't really rate Genaro very high. I think the guy's got heart. I think he's tough, but I think he lacks a lot defensively on the feet and in the grappling. I don't think he has the best gas tank. If the Evan Elder from the Nazim Sadykov fight shows up, he wins this fight 3 out of 4 times to me. So I opted to lay 2 units straight on him at minus 180 or minus 280 instead of waiting for that line, to get another parlay leg with it, because it has moved to minus 320 and stuff now. So I think Evan Elder's going to get him down and submit him pretty easy, man. I think they gave him a good fight to get back on track with. Going to be my best bet despite whatever his price tag is.
Nice. I don't have that strong of a read on it, but I like your confidence in him. I hope he covers that price tag. We move on to the quick pick section of the podcast, where we start the night in the women's bantamweight division. Ashley Evans Smith taking on Eileen Perez. Kind of a comical face-off, man. Neither one of them really look like fighters, if you ask me. Right. The Eileen Perez line jumping up to the way that it did, it's a tough play, but sure, I'll pick Eileen Perez as my play right here.
I'm honest with you, man. When I bet Holly Holm and I bet Norma Dumont, I almost bet Eileen Perez as well. And I was like, do I really want 3 money lines on women's MMA this week? People must have saw what I saw, because now she's like a minus 230 or something. I think she's the rightful side, but not touching the line where it is now. Men's 155, Carl Deaton taking on Alex Munoz. Munoz coming back, I think it's like a 2-year layoff or something now, dealing with some ACL injuries. Alex Munoz of old shows up, clear wrestling path to victory, man. Oklahoma State wrestler, like very, very high level wrestling here coming from Alexander Munoz. And I think he beats Carl Deaton by decision.
Yeah, I'm on the Munoz side as well. The layoff's a little concerning, but I know he's an MMA coach, so you got to think that he's still around it even when he is recovering. So yeah, I'll take Munoz in that fight. Tyson Nam versus Azat Maxim. A little upset that Nam wasn't bigger in face-offs. I thought that he was going to have like a significant size advantage, and he doesn't really. Obviously, like there's a possibility that I also find myself on Nam's TKO just because I think it's the most valuable prop of the fight. But it is tough to think that Tyson Nam's going to be the one to catch this prospect here. So my official pick is Azat. But yeah, I think the value on that prop is good.
Yeah, reiterating what you just said, man. I think it's incredible value on that TKO because I think that's the way that Tyson Nam's going to win this fight if he were to pull it out. But yeah, not picking against the 16-0 prospect. I'm going to go as at Maxim to get it done. Valdez, Evan Elder. Just heard my thoughts on this fight, man. I really like Evan Elder to get the job done.
I think Valdez is a tough opponent. I think he's going to give him a tough fight, but I'm with you. I think Evan Elder is the more polished of the two. So I'll side with Evan Elder for the quick pick section. Austin Lingo versus Melk Costa. I am on the Melk Costa side, although, I don't love the price tag. I don't think Lingo's that good. So it really could have been anybody on the other side, and I'd be siding with them. Melk Costa's the pick for me.
Yeah, Austin Lingo's like right hand or bust, and as you get into the UFC, when you start fighting these better guys, it's just harder to land that home run shot. I'm going to side with Melquizael Costa as well. Move down to the women's strawweight. Estela Nunez taking on Victoria Dudikova. I still almost want to side with Estela Nunez, man. I still think that's where the value is if you look at the money line. So I'm going to take Estela Nunez here to get back on track. I know the UFC kind of likes this Dudikova girl, Russian, cute, fought through a nasty knee injury in like the first minute of her fight or something. So she's a tough girl, don't get me wrong, but plus 190, I think on Estela Nunez is a bit off, so I'll side with her.
So I'm going with Dudikova. I think that it's more likely that under 2.5 cashes with her just taking Nunez down and getting the sub. So I'll side with Dudikova here. Not too strong on picking a side though. I just like that under. For the prelim main event, we go to the featherweight division. Tucker Lutz taking on Melsik Bagdasaryan. I don't like laying juice on Melsik Bagdasaryan, but I think he's the far more athletic of the two. He's the better striker of the two. I'm not going to lay the juice on him, but Melsik's my pick.
Melsik's my pick as well. The same thing, not laying the juice. I think, honestly, earlier in the week, there was some value on Tucker Lutz just because he might be able to survive the early storm and get him down. But I truly don't have interest in betting this fight, if I'm being honest with you. I didn't think either one of them looked the best on the scale either. But I'll side with Melsik Bagdasaryan to get back on track. And to kick off our main card, UFC, they know what they're doing here to kick off the main card. We got Terrance McKinney taking on Nazim Sadykov. And funny enough, I know Dudikova and Maxim are making their UFC debuts, so we kind of got to throw them out. But we got to get all the way to the main card before we see a fighter who's coming off of a win in Nazim Sadykov. So that is not something you like to see on a fight night, man. Just being honest with you. I'm gonna go Terrance McKinney. That's who I sided with when I broke down the fight. What you said, plus 240 round one, it's almost like an auto bet just because he's so freakishly athletic and dangerous early on. I'm gonna side with him, man. I'll take Terrance McKinney.
I'm siding with Nazim Sadykov here. I'm not happy about it, because he's gonna have to endure like a really tough early pressure, but yeah, he's the pick. I think he's the better MMA fighter. But yeah, obviously that round one prop that looks good for the Terrance McKinney side. I don't know what the UFC is doing here, putting this fight on the main card. Norma Dumont versus Chelsea Chandler at featherweight.
What do you mean? This is a number one contender fight.
Yeah, right. In the division that doesn't exist. I think I've got Norma Dumont here. I think that she's just a little more experienced, and I think if Chandler can't find a sub, I think Norma's going to be able to just kind of outwork her to a decision. Not an exciting fight by any means. Norma's the side for me.
Chelsea Chandler is coming off a win over a girl who's trying to make flyweight her next fight. And in the first 10 seconds of that fight, Stoliarenko took her down with the easiest takedown I've ever seen. Now, later on in the fight, there were moments where Chelsea was just kind of able to use that size to get on top. But, dude, I mean, she took her down with ease and went straight to the mount. I needed to see 20 seconds of that fight to know Norma Dumont can make this competitive, and to see all the UFC experience and stuff she has. Easy bet for me on Norma Dumont, man. I think she's the clear side for me here. I don't really get the Chelsea Chandler love. Main card, moving on up, 185, supposed to be the co-main event. Still on the main card, though, we got Albert Duraev taking on Jung Yun Park. Albert Duraev's my underdog this week, so he's going to be the pick as well.
I don't know. I need to give this fight a little bit more of my attention, to be honest with you. I think Park, being that he's had such he's had a decent career in the UFC. It's not just his last 2 wins. He's put together like a somewhat solid resume in the UFC up until this point. And it just seems like he never gets the love that he deserves. And Duraev, I'm still like unsure if he's a fraud or not. It's a tough one for me to call. I'm going to side with Jun Young Park. Strictly because of the UFC experience and success he's found up until this point. But I do think it's going to be a really close one. So as far as betting it, I don't blame you at all for taking the plus money side. I definitely see where you're coming from there. Moving down to the 155 weight class, Ottman Azaitar versus Francisco Prado. I think Prado's the sharper guy here. I've got Prado to get this done.
Yeah, looking at 2 bets potentially to add before the fight starts Saturday. Prado being one of those. So I'm going to be on that same side as you. Love to hear all the same convictions, the same thoughts that I have. Co-main event, Jack Della Maddalena versus Bassil Hafez. The second bet I'm looking at here, the under 1.5 is minus 195. It was like minus 3 something last week for Jack Della Maddalena. Jack did make weight last week as well, having to recut, weigh in again. I don't know. Bassil hot taking it on short notice, potentially gas and having a rough weight cut. I think under 1.5 should be like, I don't know. I think it should be minus 250 or something here. So I might hit the under 1.5. I like Jack Della Maddalena to get it done.
I like Jack Della Maddalena to get it done as well. It's kind of weird. I'm looking at the Jack Della round 2. There's, some sneaky numbers out there.
Yeah.
I think he's going to download a lot of information round 1. And I think Bassil's striking game is like rudimentary. I think that eventually it's going to get figured out by Jack Della, and Bassil's like tough enough that I think that he can eat that Jack's jab for 4.5 minutes, and then it'll get really sketchy late round 1, and then he'll finish him off round 2. So yeah, I'm on the Jack Della Maddalena side, but tough to try and find a way to play that. Moving to the main event, women's bantamweight, Holly Holm versus Myra Bueno Silva. I expect Holly Holm to just piece her up, but over 5 rounds, it's a little interesting because Manon Fiorot was tearing her up in 3 rounds. Holly's bigger, going to be throwing a little bit harder, and she's got to last 10 more minutes. She could find a finish here, and it ruined a lot of people who are trying to get fancy and play the Holm by decision or something like that. So I do think that
like me with Sean Strickland.
Yes,
round
exactly.
4 or 5 decision.
Exactly. Yeah. So Holm is the side for me right here.
Yeah, I keep going back to that Strickland fight. For some reason, it just gives me the same type of vibes. Like it's going to be a masterclass from Holly, and she might end up getting the finish. I'm big on Holly Holm here, man. I really like her to get the job done. She's going to be the pick for me as well. Brings us to the end here, man. Talked our best fights, talked our best bets, ran through quickly all 13 total fights. I know it's not the best fight card. A lot of these fighters coming off losses, but to be honest with you, when you look at that main card, there's going to be some good fights, man, and I'm really excited for that one. So I appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Hopefully we cash some bets next week. We'll see you then.
Peace.